can write in red if you want to write.
Hi, my name is Jamie, and today I will be taking you through this presentation on the effects of steady state exercise to the human body. So, what is steady state exercise? Steady state exercise is when the body is working at a steady state, meaning that the lactic acid removal occurs at the same rate as lactic acid is produced, quoted by BTEC National Sport and Exercise Science textbook, page 39. During steady state exercise, there are four systems which are affected, which include the cardiovascular, respiratory, neuromuscular, and energy systems. An example of this would be a person running on a treadmill. The cardiovascular system. During steady state exercise, the cardiovascular responses to exercise include an increase in heart rate, an increase in stroke volume, thermoregulation, vasodilation and vasoconstriction, an increase in systolic pressure, and a decrease in diastolic pressure. Heart rate. This diagram shows a representation of what should happen to heart rate during steady state exercise. As you can see at the start of the line, the heart rate is at its lowest. This stage is known as the resting heart rate. Immediately after exercise has commenced, you can see that the heart rate recordings increase rapidly. The reason behind this is simple. The human body requires oxygen to enable muscles to move, and therefore, as a result of exercise and the movement of the muscles more frequently, the heart is required to beat more in order to supply the muscles with sufficient oxygen. Shortly after exercise has begun, you can see on the diagram that the heart rate levels out. The reason for this is because the requirements of the amount of oxygen demanded has been met, and therefore the heart does not have to beat any harder. Stroke volume. The definition of stroke volume is the amount of blood leaving the heart through the ventricles with every contraction of the heart. During steady state exercise, the stroke volume of the heart should increase as the heart needs to supply the muscles with oxygen, as during rest the heart does not fully contract. In addition, due to a theory called Starling's law, stroke volume should increase. So what is Starling's law? Starling stated that during exercise there is an increase in venous return, meaning that more blood is supplied to the heart. This therefore causes there to be an increase in potential volume of the heart, stretching the cardiac muscle. Furthermore, the cardiac muscle can contract with more force with every stroke. Moreover, due to an increase in the volume of blood leaving the heart, this causes more blood to be returning to the heart at the same rate. Cardiac output refers to the amount of blood leaving the heart per minute. It is calculated by measuring the beats of the heart per minute and the stroke volume of the heart. During steady state exercise, cardiac output should increase due to the fact that stroke volume increases through Starling's law and the beats per minute increases as the body and muscles require more oxygen to contract and increase frequency. Thermoregulation. Thermoregulation is the human body's ability to maintain a core body temperature even with changes in the environmental temperature. This is done through two processes known as vasodilation and vasoconstriction. So what is vasodilation? Vasodilation refers to the widening of the blood vessels to release excess heat into the atmosphere. During steady state exercise, the blood is directed towards the muscles needed for exercise so that the excess heat from the moving muscles can be released into the atmosphere to avoid denaturing of enzymes in the human body. So what is vasoconstriction? Vasoconstriction is a reduction in the circumference of the blood vessels to contain heat within the body. During steady state exercise, the blood is drawn away from the organs, such as the stomach, liver, and kidneys, to keep them functioning without a large volume of oxygen. There are two different pressure values related to blood pressure readings. They are the systolic and diastolic pressures. Systolic pressure. The systolic pressure is the maximum pressure which is exerted on the arteries when the blood initially leaves the heart. During steady state exercise, this value should increase due to the stroke volume of the heart increasing, therefore causing the pressure within the arteries to increase. Diastolic pressure. The diastolic pressure is the minimum pressure which is exerted on the blood vessels when the heart fills with blood. During steady state exercise, this value should initially decrease as the heart has less time to rest and fill with blood before the heart has to contract again. However, shortly after steady state exercise has begun, the diastolic pressure value should increase back to the norm as vasodilation begins to occur. Why do these changes occur? The reason for the cardiovascular changes during steady state exercise is because the human body requires oxygen from the atmosphere to convert into energy to contract the muscles, and therefore, during steady state exercise, the amount of oxygen needed has to increase. For the oxygen to reach the muscles, it has to be transported through the blood using the red blood cells and the hemoglobin more frequently, and therefore changes in the cardiovascular system have to occur. The benefit of the cardiovascular system responses to steady state exercise are that the body is able to continue exercising without having a shortage of oxygen to the brain and the muscles, potentially causing the person to faint. The respiratory system. During steady state exercise, the respiratory responses to exercise include the tidal volume increases, the breathing rate increases, and oxygen uptake increases. Tidal volume is the volume of air which is breathed in and out per inspiration and expiration. During steady state exercise, the tidal volume should increase. The reason for this is because the muscles require more oxygen to be supplied to them in order for them to perform the necessary contractions to allow for the movement to occur. As a result, the tidal volume increases so to improve the efficiency of the human body. Furthermore, during exercise, a waste product which is produced is carbon dioxide, which needs to be exhaled into the atmosphere as in large quantities it is poisonous and can be fatal. Therefore, it is vital that the tidal volume of the lungs increases so that the carbon dioxide can be exhaled. During steady state exercise, the breathing frequency should increase rapidly as exercise is initiated and then level out as the requirements of oxygen are met. The reason for breathing frequency increasing is due to the fact that the muscles require more oxygen in order for the muscles to contract, and therefore the frequency of breaths per minute needs to increase to meet the increased demand. Furthermore, a waste product of respiration, carbon dioxide, has to be exhaled into the atmosphere through the lungs, and therefore the frequency of breath has to increase to remove the carbon dioxide faster. The dissociation curve. The dissociation curve has two axes, the y-axis being the percentage saturation of oxyhemoglobin in the blood, and the x-axis being the partial pressure of oxygen in the blood. The percentage saturation of oxyhemoglobin in the blood tells you how many of the red blood cells have oxygen attached to them, and the partial pressure of oxygen in the blood shows the amount of oxygen in the blood which has not been bonded to the red blood cells. So near the origin of the curve, this shows that there is no oxygen in the blood and therefore 0% saturation of oxyhemoglobin. This stage on the diagram would occur at the muscles as all the oxygen has been released into the muscles for them to use in order for contractions to occur. On the other hand, at the end of the curve, we see that there are 100 grams of partial pressure of oxygen and 100% saturation of oxyhemoglobin in the blood. This shows that all the red blood cells are occupied by oxygen and there is no more room for the greater volumes of oxygen to be acquired. This phase on the diagram would occur at the lungs when oxygen is inhaled and chemically bonded together with the hemoglobin in the red blood cells. The dissociation curve is able to shift in two directions depending on two factors. These factors are the pH and the temperature. If the pH in the blood is above 7, making it an alkali, then the curve has to shift to the left to reduce the amount of oxygen available to the red blood cells. On the other hand, if the pH value is below 7, making it an acid, then the amount of oxygen present in the blood has to increase, and therefore the curve has to shift to the right. If the core temperature increases in the human body, then this will result in the weakening and denaturing of the bonds between the oxygen and hemoglobin. Therefore, this will see an increase in the concentration of oxygen in the blood, and as a result, the curve will shift to the right. On the other hand, a decrease in temperature will have no effect on the weakening of the bonds of the red blood cells, so therefore the curve will shift to the left, as the oxygen and the hemoglobin bind together and oxygen uptake increases. During steady state exercise, the neuromuscular responses to exercise include increased pliability and increased speed of neurotransmission. Pliability. As the muscles in the body begin to warm up and stretch gradually, they become more pliable. Pliability is the ability of the muscles to stretch during exercise without causing injury through tears. Therefore, it is important that the muscles become pliable during exercise so that the muscles do not tear and cause injury to the person. During steady state exercise, the muscles warm up to become more pliable. Due to the temperature increasing in these muscles, this causes the speed of nerve impulses running through those muscles to increase. Therefore, the contraction speeds increase. An example of this could be a football goalkeeper warming up before a football match, as this increases their reaction times, therefore helping them to save the ball during a match. During steady state exercise, the energy system response to exercise is an increase in ATP production. Glucose is the main form of energy available to humans, commonly found through consumption of food. When energy is required for the muscles to contract during steady state exercise, glucose and two ATP molecules come together to break down the glucose into glycogen. From there, the glycogen is converted into pyruvic acid, and depending on if there is oxygen present, follows two different paths. If oxygen isn't present, then the ATP is produced through anaerobic glycolysis, and full ATP molecules are produced, with the waste product being lactic acid. On the other hand, if oxygen is present, then the pyruvic acid enters the Krebs cycle. When the pyruvic acid finishes the Krebs cycle, two more ATP molecules are produced along with hydrogen ions. Then the hydrogen ions enter an electron path, and this results in 32 ATP molecules being produced. This process takes quite a long time and therefore is only able to be used when the person is carrying out steady state exercise. ATP production takes place in the cristae of the mitochondria.